Hello everyone, welcome to my first Zero to Hero challenge. In this series, I will be progressing from 0 to 2500 Mythic Plus rating on a fresh Restoration Shaman. Few words about the rules. Mostly there are no rules. I will only refrain myself from using any paid boosting service. Other than that, anything goes that the game has to offer, which means I allow myself to use Warbond items, currencies, reputation, any renown rewards, including claiming crests and valor stones. I am allowed to join any groups, no matter what their item level or Mythic Plus rating is. Playing alongside friends is also allowed. Let's jump into it. Let's start the journey with a quick recap. As you will see, I'm not a professional World of Warcraft player. I've been around since the Burning Crusade. I played all roles and almost all specs, but I only started playing Mythic Plus dungeons in the Dragonflight Season 3, meaning I'm still learning most of the dungeons. I'm not a fan of using add-ons. I imagine the functionality they offer can be or should be covered by the game itself, so I will keep the add-on usage only to the essentials. Hopefully, this series of videos will encourage other players to pick up other roles rather than DPS, as the Mythic Plus dungeon scene definitely lacking tanks and healers. I'm expecting to talk more about this topic during the series. The goal for this week to hit level 80, complete all the weekly free loot options, put together a proper starting gear from the rewards, auction house and the quartermasters, get a 4-set bonus using the catalyst as we are well progressed into the season, get enchants, get consumables, find a proper Mythic Plus build with Totemic hero talents, and by the end of the week complete at least 4 Mythic Plus dungeons. What makes this challenge interesting for me is that I've only achieved Keystone Hero in Dragonflight Season 2 on a Protection Paladin and the Blood Death Knight. And also, if there is a spec that I'm the least familiar with, it's definitely healing, so I'm expecting a lot of ups and downs during the series. As we smash into LFR and the Time Walking raid, it's insane how quick and easy to get a starting gear in this expansion. Alright, all the preparation done. We are sitting at an item level of 591 and good to start our first Mythic Plus dungeon. We are starting with Stonewall plus 2. Nice big pool at the beginning, a few of the CCs being used, but overall no problem for the group. Now as we approaching the first boss, I must say I never killed this one as a healer, however I do know there is some kind of debuff to this spell, but only this spell at the right time. Obviously, I always dispel it too early. Oh well, lucky enough, it's only a plus 2. Skarmorak, probably the easiest boss of the dungeon. The recipe is quite easy, don't stand in stuff, make sure to not destroy all the smoke crystals in one go, grab a few orbs for healing and damage buff, and basically you are all set for the kill. Oh, the duo boss fight. As the opposite of the previous one, probably the keybreaker fight of the dungeon. You need good positioning, good interrupting, you need to make sure they both die in the same time. And all these being spiced up with the weekly FX, things can go wrong really quick and really easily. In this instance, I'm trying to take care of the ranged interrupt, but fortunately our mage is faster. And as that being said, they would go down, not a sweat. To be fair, this round felt like a walk in the park. The group didn't make it harder than it necessarily should be. So after all, we end up completing the dungeon for a plus 3 and I'm claiming my well deserved 55 gold. The next one is a Necrotic Quick plus 3, where the beauty of the low keys really shines through. We had some ignored boss mechanics. Accidental pulls.
Embrace who you truly are. run out to target you.
I must preserve your parts for later. In the south!
And some poor positioning. After all the fun we had, we managed to time the key, and moving on to the next one. Green Battle plus 2, where the tongue decides to pick a route I have never seen before, leaving the two trash alive next to Aliona, which is odds. A surprisingly smooth kill. Good job, team. And last but not least, we have a Siege of Boralus plus 4, where I pulled the shortest straw after a clunky pull. During these runs, the healing capabilities were not truly challenged, but my interrupts were definitely lacking, my DPS was underwhelming, and my mana management was non-existent. There is definitely room for improvement. We have now successfully completed the weekly target of 4 mythic dungeons. As a result, we are finishing the week with an item level of 594 and a whopping Mythic Plus rating of 759. Hello everyone, welcome back to the second episode of my Zero to Hero adventure on the Restoration Shaman. On this week, we managed to complete 8 Mythic Plus dungeons, got some very disappointing loot, some headache, but at the end of the week, we at least managed to boost our rating quite a bit. We continue where we left off, item level still sitting at 594 and our Mythic Plus rating still sitting at 759. On this week, I will ignore all other weekly activities, I will only complete the Mythic dungeons, so let's jump into it. Starting with opening the Great Vault, the selection is not that great, the no-brainer choice is definitely the Hero Chest piece. Our weekly key is a Stone Wall plus 4, which I'm really not sure that I will be using. The first run of the week is a Mist plus 3, and let me start off by saying how much I hate this dungeon. I just hate everything about it. The loading screen, the color scheme, the sound effects, the creatures, the flow of the dungeon, the encounters. Any second I spend here is painful, but we need to tackle this obstacle to reach our goals. The first boss goes down with a few unnecessary deaths, but the next part is the one that I dread the most. As far as I know, helping the team to navigate through the maze and spotting the clone during the boss fight should be the duty of the healer. I don't mind the extra responsibility, but at this point, I feel I need some help from an add-on. So I installed the Maze Helper add-on, and basically the sole purpose of this run to get familiar with the add-on itself, as I have never used it before. The way the add-on works is quite simple, however it requires some of your attention. You will need to reveal the symbols. Select the symbols from the add-on manually, and after selecting all 4, the add-on will announce in the chat which is the correct path. For this maze section, this is quite easy to deal with unless all of a sudden your team starts falling over. However, on the boss fight itself, it's quite a different story. The Mistcaller fight, where there is already a lot happening, a Tankbuster spell to interrupt, a dodgeball to avoid, an odd to CC or kill, a guessing game to take part where you need to find the odd one out and take it down before they take you down. The fight can start slipping very easily at any point during the fight, and adding extra distraction for yourself can sometimes result in your own demise. At this point, my performance is already awful. During this run, I die all over and over again while messing with the add-on. The team also fails to follow any of the mechanics. At this point, I have some real doubts of how I will be able to complete this dungeon on a plus 10.
I must get closer.
Stay away from lines. Stay away from lines. Stay away from lines.
Your ascension.
Lines.
After many unsuccessful attempts, the frustration peaks and the team decides to give up. What a flying start. Moving on to the next one. City of Threads plus 4. In my opinion, the most boring dungeon of the season. However, as I'm not fully clear about the mechanics here, could be quite an interesting one. The magic debuff keeps me thinking, what's the proper way of doing this? So I end up dispelling myself and stunning the Shaman on the other side, who also happens to have the other pair of the debuff and the purple beam on itself. Somehow the Shaman lives another day, unlike the mage who stayed in the puddle and could not be saved. But after all, the boss goes down, and now we have arrived to the most boring part of the dungeon, chasing the three eyes of the queen.
Another spine is full.
Your ascension.
There is really not much to mention about the duo boss fight. After chasing them all around the arena, they go down quite easily. At this section, we definitely lose control of the situation. We end up bouncing all over the place, hatching additional adds, and we end up wiping.
Your ascension
Target
is
change.
complete.
Let's just pretend that never happened.
Only the strongest survive.
It's one of those boss fights that looks very simple at first, but can end up being a struggle. In this case, our bloodlust is on cooldown, but the team manages to burst it down with no issues.
Target
Is
change.
complete.
Witness the glory.
AoE incoming.
Quite uneventful and slow run, but we end up timing the key for a +1 and some well-deserved gold. And now, we are in Arakara +4, the scariest dungeon of the season. To set the mood of the run, I die like a donkey twice, rather
Your
quick on the first
survival
boss.
Wasn't your
Even though I failed quite badly here, this is not the reason why I consider this dungeon the scariest of the season. The last encounter, without a doubt, is the most challenging one, simply because of the negative effect of the tunnel vision we have all heard and experienced before. Also, by the time you reach the last boss, most of the work is done. All you need to do is take down one single unit of enemy, and this is usually the set part where the groups end up fighting multiple times, throwing all progress out of the window and eventually disbanding the group. Fight goes quite smooth until the point where we decide to pick the same pool, but there is obviously only room for one, so I end up dying to the big AoE. We managed to recover and finish the key for a +2. Next one is Dawnbreaker +4. We managed to get a pretty good group here, and as I was expecting after the first pool, we're just smashing through the whole dungeon. The pools are fine, the beams are fine, transition is fine, the rogue dying is fine, and the boss going down is also fine. First mini boss, fine. Second, fine. Third, fine.
Run.
Not much of an issue at the boss fight either. The big orb being handled properly, the boss goes down smoothly. And now we have arrived to the last boss, a rather gimmicky fight.
Watch your step.
Is complete.
As the group has been doing exceptionally well, there was really not much to expect on the last fight either. The boss goes down really easily, but after the fight, we all end up dying. I'm really not sure what happened there. Dying after completing the dungeon didn't really change much. We successfully managed to time the key for a +3. Next one is a Green Battle +5, where I started losing my sanity. After clearing the trash before the drakes, slight miscoordination happens within the group. One part of the group decides to take flight, the other decides to pull another pack. But by the time of the landing, the tides have changed.
Only the strong.
From this point, the group really starts to fall apart. We start with some overpulling before the second boss.
Target
Is
changed.
complete.
During the fight, the tank decides to pull the boss into the wrong direction. At the third phase, the tank gets obliterated. Even though it gets battle res, we are already too late. And as a result, we ran out of space, and we also ended up pulling an additional puck,
Your ascension
which after all ended wiping the fight again.
is complete.
Defensive.
Listen,
Third time the charm, the boss finally goes down, but there is a lot more to come.
Target
is
changed.
complete.
At this point, I was really expecting the Valiuna fight to fail on the elementals. However, despite the tank turning the devouring flames on the group twice, we still managed to take down the boss. And as a victory rush, the group decides to throw out all the progress and the
Your
remaining time we have.
Target
Is
changed.
complete.
Bramble.
Your survival wasn't necessary.
With this very unfortunate pull and wiping, we definitely lost all chance of being able to time the key. The last fight really goes down as you would be expecting it. People staying in the Shadow Gale or stepping into the Shadow Gale, the tank being caught by a tentacle and being obliterated by the boss short after. No wonder we end up wiping the first attempt.
Only the strongest.
Fortunately, the second attempt goes much smoother and the boss goes down. We failed to time the key, and I also ended up getting no loot again, but at least now I'm free from this place. Oh, Mist of Tyrna +3, we are back again. The last round left a little bit of bad taste, and I also feel like I need more practice with the Mishapper add-on, so here we go. There is really not much to say here. I will speed up the video until we reach my personal favorite, the Squeaky Toy Boss. We fail a few mechanics here, we suffer some casualties, but finally the reign of terror is over. Heading on to the last boss, goes down nice and simple, missing a little bit of percentage, but the extra trash is well within reach, ending the key with a +2, and what about the loot again? well, let's just forget about it. The next one is a Necrotic Wake +5. From the very first pool, it's quite obvious that our warrior tank is very clear of what needs to be done. Not surprisingly, my impression that the tank ends up carrying the group throughout the whole dungeon by choosing a great route, doing great pulls, controlling the situation, and also handling all the armaments. This run definitely felt like a relief after those unfortunate Green Bottle and Mists of Tirna rounds. Definitely best run of the week. The run is quite seamless, we end up finishing the dungeon for a +3. Stoneworld +6. In terms of difficulty, this is where I draw the line for this week. I'm aware that many people reach Keystone Hero on the first week, however for me, my item level feels somewhat low for the difficulty. By this week, I believe I learned how to dispel against the Tankbuster spell. And as that being said, the first boss goes down easily, no issues. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for a certain curse. I failed to read what my Purify spell is capable of, and I also forgot about it that I have an extra talent point on it as well. With a talent point invested in it, I would be able to dispel the curses as well, however without this information I don't even bother, resulting a few unnecessary deaths, wasting my mana, and ultimately wasting some precious time. Despite the whole run feeling really rushed for me, it's still only a +1 with some Warbound loot, but hey, we will take it for now. Mist of Tirna +6 again. Oh sorry, I meant, oh, Mist of Tirna +6 again! I just love this place, I can't get enough of it. Starting with a rather big pool, I haven't noticed it before on the lower keys, but there is some nasty debuff ticking on me on this time. I'm literally seconds away from dying. If this was a +10 on a trash week, I'm really not sure how we should survive this. But anyways, smashing through the first boss and the maze, and we reach the lair of the abomination itself. This creature haunts my dreams. I die by paying attention to the add-on. Then I die again by paying attention to the add-on. Then the whole fight starts slipping and we end up wiping. Then we go again and then I die again playing with the add-on. Then the guessing game goes horribly wrong again, so we wipe again. The group is really frustrated at this point, and I personally ready to give it up. However, we decide go for a last try. Not a clean kill by any means, but at least the monstrosity is finally no more. Heading on to the last boss, we already ran out of time for certain reasons, but we are still dedicated to finish the dungeon. I'm really tired and I can't focus on the game anymore. I obviously end up dying to the swirly because of that, but the team manages to take down the boss without me. Clearing a little bit more of the trash for the missing percentage, but as they die, we successfully complete the last dungeon of the week. I'm still really not satisfied with my overall performance. The loot was quite disappointing through all the dungeons, but we managed to complete 8 Mythic Plus dungeons and closing with an item level of 599 and the Mythic Plus rating of 1751. Hello and welcome to the third episode on the adventures of the mighty Waterbucket. I was very disappointed with last week's loot, so I decided to do a little bit of normal raiding, where we got a little bit lucky and managed to get a fairly decent healing trinket. And by the time I'm recording this, I already claimed another trinket from the Great Vault, so the item level looks a little bit different than where we left off. We are going to start the week with an item level of 606, and we also managed to get 2 decent healing trinkets, so I'm already feeling positive about this week's progress. By opening the vault, I was hoping for a weapon or for a trinket, because by any means those were the weakest part of my current gear. The selection is not that great, and not so surprisingly, I will end up choosing the Trinket, and we also get a Necrotic Wake 6 key for the week. For this week, I set the goal of trying to reach a rating of 2200, and I will also try to time a 10 plus key. We are starting the week with the Siege of Boralus plus 7, where from early on I'm really suspecting that the team is really not clear with the mechanics of this dungeon. The signs really starts to show at the second boss, where the tank stays within the AoE and dies, but thanks to a quick combat res we recover and take down the boss. The pools are really getting out of hands. A lot of overpooling, and at this point I feel like I can do absolutely nothing to keep the team alive. We end up wiping multiple times, losing a lot of our progress. So after all, we reach the third boss, we take it down. However, at this point, it's obvious that we won't be able to time the key. On the last boss, I find myself in a rather weird situation, where the team always leaves me behind for the cannons. Considering I'm a healer and there are debuffs to dispel, I'm really not sure if this is the right choice. The evoker in the group comes to the rescue multiple times, which is quite helpful, thank you very much, but I would rather have any of the DPS firing those cannons. After the last shot, the boss eventually goes down and we end up with a pretty nice upgrade. Even though we didn't time the key, I would still consider this a good start. The next one is a Dawnbreaker plus 7. I would like to spice up the video and say how awful this run was, however that wouldn't be true. Everything is spot on, not many casualties, and we end up finishing the dungeon for a plus 2. No any loot for me, but the spirits are high for the next one. Arakara plus 7. Arakara plus 7. Arakara plus 7. Now as you witnessed my outstanding performance, the group stays quite chill about my mistakes, smashing through the rest of the dungeon, and I must say this week has been quite smooth so far. We end up finishing the key for a plus 2. And now it's time to eat my words. As the previous runs were quite successful, and we already started the week with a few nice upgrades, I decided to increase the difficulty and only do 8 or above in the next runs. So here we are in a City of Threads plus 8, where the initial trash packs are already giving us a hard time. The damage is insane, the interrupts are probably not the best, and it's pretty much the same recipe until we reach the first boss. I'm still unclear of how the dispel should be done here, but that's not what will actually lead into our demise. The first big purple puddle is not a problem, however the second one. There is an unfortunate turn of the events. The tank taking its position indicating which way it's going to move. Some of the group members, including myself, follows, and in the very last second the tank decides to move a different direction. In the heat of the moment we didn't notice the change to the plan, so we end up wiping. Someone gets offended by this horrible act, leaving the group and ruining the key. I was really disappointed and I wasn't ready to give up yet. We were still well in time, so instead of getting offended and playing the blame game, we should have just carried on and probably finishing the dungeon for at least a plus 1. This is one of those examples that makes no sense by any means and just giving a bad reputation to the Mythic Plus dungeon and the community itself. As I wanted to complete a City of Threads dungeon for this week, I came back with a different group on a plus 7, not the best run possible, but we end up finishing for a plus 1. The next one is a Necrotic Wake plus 8. The first boss gave me a scary moment. The lesson here is to use the defensive cooldown. However, it's not that simple for the next section. The group really struggles clearing the trash between the first and the second boss.
Crowd control. Frontal.
We managed to add quite a few deaths to the counter, but after reaching the boss, things go smooth again. There is quite a lot of time lost. However, the group is doing the mechanics well on the upcoming boss fights. Very nice group overall. We end up the dungeon for a +1 and I also managed to get another upgrade. The next one is a green battle +8. I was really afraid of this dungeon because of the trash pools being exceptionally hard. However, this paladin tank seems to be very beefy and doing a lot of self-healing. The run is going quite smooth and quick until we come across the Molten Giants. The boss fight is easy, but then there are the enforcers to teach us a lesson. Some cheesy tactics on the Valiona fight, corruption sending me to oblivion, but the last boss goes down, we finish the key for a +1, and I get my well-deserved trinket. Mists of Tirna +8. As you know, this is my favorite dungeon, so I decided to come back once again. In one of my previous videos, I mentioned that I'm quite scared about the first trash pool. However, in this instance, it seems to be going much better than ever before. As expected, the first boss goes down quite easily. This time, I feel more focused,
From lines, run
but
out.
we can't say the same for everyone else. I was dedicated to help the team with spotting the clones, but at some point during the fight, the add-on covering the screen really started to disturb me and I fully given up using the add-on. This time the group is dealing much better with the guessing game. The dodgeball not all the time, but now my favorite part where the squeaky toy finally goes down and we are free to move forward. Nice and easy from here, we finish the dungeon for a +1. Jumping into Stonewall +8. We are starting the run with quite a big pool, but nothing that the team couldn't handle. At the time of the recording, in this moment I didn't make my assumptions of who is going to be the first one leaving the group. Someone didn't feel like to participate in the fight, but that didn't stop us to bring the boss down. On the next boss, we decided to follow the same idea, but then there was no one else to complete the job. Let's see a hint of who might be the first leaving the group. After the good old blame game, with the element of surprise, someone ends up leaving the group. Similar to the City of Threads attempt, Stonewood had to be completed this week, so I decided to come back on a lower level with a different team. We had quite a few deaths during the run, but overall the group was smashing through, so we finished the dungeon for a +2. I was planning to finish and wrap up the week at this point. However, considering that we still have quite a lot of time left until the next reset, I decided to upgrade my gear as much as possible and try to attempt a 10+ key. So I quickly grabbed a weapon from the Blackrock raid. I spent all the Valor Stones and all the crests, so we end up with an item level of 611. After waiting approximately half an hour to get into a group, we are finally in a green bottle +10. Being the first 10 of the season, I'm quite nervous and I end up making really silly mistakes.
Watch your feet.
I was trying to help as much as possible with the interrupts and the stuns, but that one definitely slipped through and it's not only on me. The dreaded Valiona fight goes relatively smooth until the second attempt goes much better, but we are going to pay for the first one. On the first Shadow Gale, I somehow get caught by the tentacle and by miracle I live through. The boss goes down, but unfortunately we ran out of time by a whopping 17 seconds. There was one more dungeon on the list that has been bugging me and I felt like it must be completed this week. Keep in mind, this is a +8, but I somehow have déjà vu as the previous run The group doesn't seems to be knowing the mechanics, or at least following it, even for the first boss. The run feels very slow and sluggish, however we are making progress. After the first boss, on one of the trash pools, unfortunately the tank DCs, and there is nothing I can do to save the situation. The blame game immediately starts without having any kind of knowledge of what actually happened. 3 seconds later, our tank comes back, but after these eons of waiting, the most offended one has already left. Some things just wasn't meant to be, I guess. Quite a lot has been done this week, and quite a lot has been achieved. We couldn't time a plus 10, but we finished this week with an item level of 611 and a Mythic Plus rating of 2226. Hello everyone, welcome back to the last episode of the adventures of the mighty Waterbucket. I apologize for my voice as I have fallen sick, but I didn't want to wait more to delay the video further. I had some free time on my hands, so I'm happy to say that we have reached our goal of the Keystone Hero relatively quick. I was planning to give the challenge another 2 or 3 more weekly resets, but the continuous failures of certain runs just kept bugging me. And as that being said, that's the end of the series. Thank you very much for watching and see you in the next one. Okay, instead of that, let's just go back in time now. It's Tuesday evening. After putting together and uploading the previous episodes, there was still some time left to do a few runs before the reset. So jumping into an Arakara +9 in hope for some free score and the best in slot trinket. This time no falling through the floor, low death count and an easy clear overall. The last fight kept me worried in advance. The poison debuff is quite challenging to deal with. Even with the help of the Poison Clan's totem, I still failed to keep our warlock alive, who was stopping the DPS meter. But nevertheless, we still take down the boss. We are back to siege, and we are off to a good start. This place has now officially dethroned Mists of Tirna, being the most hated dungeon for me. This place is just the same old all over and over again. You group up with people who has the item level, they have the rating, however the whole run just never seemed to work. This seems to happen every single time in every single round. When the tank rushes ahead, the DPS dies, and after there is an immediate crazy pull. And now it's time to throw out any progress we made so far. The crazy pull gets out of hand, then the crazy pull gets out of hand again. We keep wiping all over and over again. As a healer, I would say I'm trying my best, but I really don't see me being able to heal through this. And the usual occurrence of trash talking has already reached a critical level. The group keeps blaming the tank, however what I see the only flaw was that the tank was playing on a much higher level than we were and we just simply couldn't keep up. But the blame game takes its toll and our tank makes a pretty big mistake on the last boss. By leaving the melee tentacle a bit too early, resulting one of the DPS immediately dying, and the 2 debuff also hitting the group in the same time. We managed to recover and finish the fight, but we are well out of time anyways. Dawnbreaker 9. I was really afraid of this one, however I have absolutely nothing to complain about. A very nice group, just smashing through the whole dungeon. There is really not much to say about this one. Nice and quick +2 and a free rating of 25. Now the backlog is clear and it's time for the Great Vault. Our weakest points are the neck and the cloak piece, so I'm hoping for an upgrade on any of those. But the RNG gods say no to our prayers, so I end up leaving with a mythic leg piece. This week, we are starting strong. We are starting with an item level of 613, a Mythic Plus rating of 2306. I feel like we are in a good position to time the plus 10s and reach the Keystone Hero. So let's start the week with a slap to the face of the ambition. We are in a Necrotic week plus 10, and I'm just unable to keep the tank and the group alive despite burning all my mana, which obviously can never end well. We are in the stage where we can't just mess around anymore, and everyone has to be on board. Mechanics and cooldowns, they need to be spot on to succeed from here. Let me take this moment to reflect on how I feel about healing the different tank classes. My personal favorite is the Blood Death Knight. Not a single second to worry about them. Basically a one-man army, allowing me to keep the rest of the 4 alive at all times. Paladins and warriors, they have great mitigation and self-heal. Brewmaster monks, they are pretty much almost all above with an added extra insane mobility. But there are 2 that I just can't get along with. Guardian druids seem to be obliterated upon facing any kind of magic damage, but not too bad overall. But the worst and the most shocking for me is the Vengeance Demon Hunter so far. This tank is the highest on any list that you can possibly find on the internet. However, without exception, I'm never able to keep any of them alive. It feels like when they have their own defensive cooldowns, they are pretty much indestructible, but when they don't have their full arsenal of defensive cooldowns, as a healer it feels like there is nothing you can do to save them. Maybe it's just me being bad at healing, or not knowing how to heal a demon hunter. But keep in mind, during this challenge, I'm not spending hours of reading any sorts of guides from external sources, as I imagine you should be able to understand and play the game within its own boundaries. Okay, so after ranting a little and failing 2 Necrotic Wake 10s, we are now back to Mist of Tirna. Another superb group with the Brewmaster tank who is just carrying through the whole dungeon.
Stay away from
With a very few exceptions, everything is spot on.
Stay away from lines.
And all the Mythic Plus pain goes away when I see this godforsaken thing biting the dust. A rather risky pull, but I felt like this might be the end of the run. But we end up powering through, taking the boss down, finishing the dungeon for a +2 and gaining a juicy 44 Mythic Plus rating. The next one is an Arakara +10, where we have a bumpy start by unintentionally pulling an additional trash, which was left uncontrolled, so you can guess what happens next. I'm really not sure what's happening here. I look away for a second, the next call of Brood casts, and 2 of us hits the floor. I was pretty much out of mana at this point, and I was hoping that the mini-boss dies before the next cast. Fortunately, the group keeps it cool, and we carry on. The rest of the dungeon goes quite uneventful. The last boss feels easier than on the previous attempts. Despite the bumpy start, we end up timing the key for a +1, earning a little bit of Mythic Plus rating, but our best in slot trinket is still to find. The next one is a Stonewall 9, where the toxicity reaches a biblical level. The infamous fear goes out, and we immediately wipe. This gives a good opportunity to our warlocks to start trash talking about how bad we are, completely ignoring the fact that there was an interrupt that was badly missed by the whole group. I was hoping that they will decide to leave the group at this point, but instead of that we agreed to carry on. But after a short moment of clarity, the trash talking must go on. Short after, on one of the pools, the Retribution Paladin pulls aggro and immediately dies. And in the next moment, you would be wondering why the tank is running away to the dungeon entrance. In this moment, the tank decided it had enough of the relentless trash talking. I completely understand its decision, and I'm also very happy breaking free from this group. Just like before, I decided to come back on a lower difficulty with a different group. This is only a +8, so it hardly any gives Mythic Plus rating, so I already dread the fact that I know I will need to come back here at least once more. I decided to change my transmog to increase the success rate, so we are back in siege again, but the deja vu immediately hits. Despite the awful looking start, the rest of the dungeon goes quite smooth. The warlock also offers to help me with the dispels. During the run, I didn't know how the hunter died here. Now as I'm watching the recording back, it's quite obvious I killed him. After the best dispel EU moment, we finally timed a siege key. Unbelievable. City of Threads +10. I really don't know what to say about this place at this point. The difficulty just feels absolutely out of this world. These dispels is just nerve-wracking at best. The puddle is unforgiving. Poor Paladin accepts the combat res at the worst time possible. The druid doesn't move on time, which is also foreshadowing who is going to be trash talking about anybody else being wrong. The fight is an absolute mess, but the boss goes down and we are still well in time. On the duo fight, the MVP and myself gets obliterated. However, I'm really confused on this one. On the third boss, I really can't keep up with the healing. We take down the boss, but we also add a few deaths to the counter. On the next pull, the group goes out of sync with the tank, nobody expecting that many odds to be pulled, and as expected, they are not being controlled properly, and we end up wiping and losing a lot more precious time. Obviously at this point, instead of focusing, someone thinks that starting the blame game on a new level is exactly what the group needs. The group is really annoyed. We end up pulling the two mini-boss before the last boss. These two are even more brutal than anything else before in the dungeon. Starting this fight with low mana is never a good idea. Inevitably, we add more deaths to the counter, which also gives a good opportunity to someone to take the blame game to a nuclear level. I wish these kind of players would invest more in their 1-2-3 rather than talking nonsense on the chat. Nevertheless, we finish the dungeon, and with the rating given, in my mind, we are good to not come back here again in this season. So the next one, it's a Grim Battle +10. We agree with the group that the second one is the big pull, but in the heat of the moment, I obviously forgot to pop the Bloodlust. We still managed to take him down.
Watch your step. Watch your step.
It's not a bad group by any means, but sometimes it feels like that somebody is not on the same page.
Shockwave.
It's not the fastest group, but we are making steady progress. Despite a few bumps, I'm positive that we are going to make it.
Embrace who you truly are.
The last pose goes down, we time the key, and now we have reached a rating of 2466. By my quick calculation, this could also mean that we are one step away from the Keystone Hero. The low-hanging apple here is the stone ward, but it's also a stone ward. I am in a group with experienced players. They have higher item level and Mythic Plus rating than usual. There are still a few mistakes here and there, but the pace is good.
Watch your safe now. Spread.
It's not too surprising at this point, but as the last boss goes down, we reach Keystone Hero. The journey is now over. We finished the adventure with an item level of 617, a Mythic Plus rating with 2509, making the total run count 37. I had to do a few rounds of recording to farm a few crests, because at some point I wasn't really getting invites to the 10 groups. So, how do we measure success here? We can say we reached the goal of the challenge, the Keystone Hero, so we are good. But for me, there is something more important here to consider, because at the end of the day, what matters is if you had fun. So did I have fun? Sometimes yes, but mostly not. And let's see why is that so. So in a few bullet points, why I didn't enjoy doing this challenge. The first one is the dungeon rotation. It's my personal preference, but I can't stand the dungeons of this season. It's more like a list of which one I hate more. Upon seeing the roster for Season 2, I might need to reconsider that sentence. The second one is the difficulty. The difficulty between the 10s and anything below that feels too much. Responsibility split amongst the roles doesn't feel equal, making tanking and healing nerve-wracking as default. And the third one is the pack community. People make mistakes, there is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with not timing a key. But the attitude and the behavior that certain members of the community allows themselves because of that is unacceptable and disgraceful. Despite the slightly negative outcome, the next series is already in production, so thank you very much for watching and see you in the next one.